Good morning, everybody. It's so good to see your faces here in the sanctuary and on Zoom, wherever you are on this cloudy, rainy morning in Boston on July 4th. Thank you for being here. I'm so grateful to be back from Colorado and able to be here with you all, and very grateful to this community of practice and imperfection that you will hold me as I preach for the first time. I'm nervous and excited. And I call that nerve-sighted, so I'm very grateful for your love and your amens and your snaps and your finger wiggles and whatever other love you can give me. So please will you pray with me. Great Spirit, loving God who helps us imagine beyond the confines of our present reality, I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts together be acceptable to you, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. So today, on this July 4th, I'm thinking about what we together choose to believe and how that belief invests our stories with power. In the gospel that we heard this morning, Mark recounts a really complicated homecoming. When Jesus begins to preach and teach and do his work in his hometown, he's met with doubts and some level of derision. How can you be a prophet? His neighbors wonder. Your sisters are sitting here right next to us. Aren't you that carpenter's kid from next door? And here's what's so interesting to me today, on July 4th in particular. In the face of their doubts, Jesus' healing and teaching seem not really to work. Mark tells us that he could do no deed of power there. He did no miracles there, except for laying his hands on a few sick people. He recounts that Jesus said, "Prophets are not without honor except in their hometown and among their own kin and in their own house." So it's people's collective capacity to believe in him and in the way that God is working through him that grants Jesus his power. Without that belief, that exchange of energy, his deeds and his teachings lose their oomph. He and his disciples choose to move on to places where people's minds are open to believing in his teachings, and therefore where healing actions are made possible. So I'm a little bit late to this party, but I've been reading the book Sapiens recently. If you've read it, will you wave your hands at me so I know? Yeah, awesome. So it's Yuval Noah Harari's book about the origins of humankind and what allowed Homo sapiens, our particular species of human, to rise to such dominance in all the ecosystems we interfaced with. The distinguishing factor that he identifies is our capacity to invent and buy into collective fictions. Ideas that become systems like nationhood, money, race, and religion that allow us to act together through common belief. Now, we call them fictions because they're inventions of the human mind. But just because they're fictions doesn't mean they don't do powerful work in the world. We know this, right? Think of the fiction of whiteness, for example. The term white didn't appear in the law of Virginia until 1681. In the wake of multiple uprisings led collectively by enslaved Africans, European indentured servants, and people indigenous to this land. That multi-ethnic coalition was so threatening to the plantation owners and power holders that they devised a way to splinter it. They created a collective fiction of whiteness. They offered shreds of power to the oppressed people they identified as white, and then they trusted that that proximity to racialized power would be enough to prevent working class so-called white people from banding together with their black and brown contemporaries and overthrowing the ruling class. So the concept of race is a fiction in the sense that it was invented by human minds. People chose to believe it, and as we know, it has done and continues to do tremendously powerful work in the world. So for me, this is what the Gospel of Mark and Yuval Noah Harari remind us, that when people band together around a particular story, when they rally their belief behind a particular narrative, either that carpenter's son is a bogus prophet or my whiteness makes me entitled to more power, that collective belief can change our horizon of possibilities. So that brings me here to July 4th. I've never been a big celebrator of the 4th. I don't know if you have. It's often seemed to me like an excuse for some Americans to enshrine this idea of American freedom and fireworks and patriotic colors, even as our government continues to oppress and deny freedom to many other countries internationally, even as people of color and working class people and queer people and women work for liberation within this nation. Whose freedom are we celebrating, I've wondered? Whose are we forgetting? Whose oppression fuels the combustion engine of racialized capitalism that we mistake for freedom in this country? Amen. But recently, thanks in large part to the obsession that a very important child in my life has with the musical Hamilton, I've also been thinking about how history is never inevitable and what pieces of this story we might still allow ourselves to be inspired by. So 245 years ago, a pretty ragtag group of people dared to breach the boundaries of their reality and imagine a different way of living, a different way of organizing themselves. In their lifetime and in those of their forebears, they had never experienced anything but the unchecked power of monarchy. It might have been simpler to stay within the bounds of the known world. It's much scarier to dare to imagine something that hasn't been birthed yet, to feel in your bones a longing for a different kind of existence, and to act with others to bring it forth. Together, they believed in the possibility of something different, and just like the gospel reading hints at, their collective action, which was unprecedented and totally improbable, wouldn't have been possible without their belief, without the creation of a fiction of an oppressive monarchy overthrown by a people who had a right to self-govern. Now, Frederick Douglass is always an important guiding light for me on this day, and he reminds us in his address, What to the Slave is the 4th of July, that undergirding that collective imagination of those white power holders who were revolutionaries, who designed the new Constitution and the new government, was an economy built on stolen labor, stolen land, and decimated families. So their idea of nationhood, the fiction that they built and used as a roadmap for the construction of a brand new reality, had at its foundation the colonization and enslavement of Black and brown people living on this land. So imbued with the power of their belief, the fiction was liberatory for white landowning people and continued to be deeply oppressive for people of color living on this land. So for me, woven through and around this complicated history are the stories of how Black and non-Black people of color got and continue to get free through the power of collective belief and through its sister, emergent action. We see the connection between belief and power when we hear the story of Harriet Tubman returning to the South over and over again to guide people to freedom. One of my favorite humans who writes and thinks today, Adrienne Marie Brown, imagines Harriet Tubman's mantra as 13 trips, 70 people, no lost passengers, my people are free. Or 19 trips, 300 people, no lost passengers, my people are free. Even as so many remained enslaved, Harriet Tubman declared, my people are free, and then acted over and over again to make it so. Belief gives fictions power because it allows for aligned action. So today, on this day, to celebrate liberation against impossible odds, I want to invite us to presence the revolutionaries dear to our own hearts and our own people, who put the power of their belief behind the possibility of life, abundance, connection, self-determination, and liberation. Maybe, as Jada told me yesterday, it's the Boricua woman Lola Rodriguez who wrote the revolutionary words to her country's Himno Revolucionario and imagined a sovereign, flourishing Puerto Rico. Maybe, as Ade told me yesterday, it's the enslaved woman in historic St. Thomas, Mary, who burned down plantation homes one by one, a bold sacrament of liberation. Maybe it's a friend you have who's committed to redistributing an uncomfortable amount of their resources towards reparation, choosing the stories of, I will have enough because we have enough, and my relationships will take care of me, over the story of, I'll only be okay if I hang on to all of this. Maybe it's a queer elder who chose to believe the story, God made me exactly who I am, and I honor God by being my fullest expression of myself. And through their living and their belief in that story, they made it truer for others. So whoever it is for you, maybe it's a hometown prophet, maybe it's someone in your life, will you take a moment with me and close your eyes if you want and just present someone in your mind and in your heart who represents that for you? Someone who's created a new reality, like Harriet Tubman or our July 4th revolutionaries, through their belief in an aspirational, if unlikely, narrative and their commitment to act to make it true. So we'll take a moment and just take some deep breaths and see if we can presence them. Can you feel them around us, all around us, moving inside of us? So today, beloveds, I'm inviting us to sit with this question. What fictions are worthy of the power of our belief? Do we see our relationship with God as a relationship of master to servant, for example, as the psalm suggests? Or do we see it differently, as the mycelial fungal network beneath the forest? We get to choose. What stories or myths or movements do we choose collectively to imbue with the dynamism and the potential because we throw the weight of our belief behind them? Where in our life are we called to be like Harriet, to declare, my people are free, and then align all our work to make it so? Where are we called to imagine something new and radical and scary beyond the bounds of what we thought was possible? Because it's there, at the margins of what's possible, in the change, in the emergence, in the space between a story and our belief in it, that God is working. Amen.
Amen, Emma. Amen.